So next we're going to have Sonia B. Gomes, LICSW, is a clinical social worker, psychotherapist, and educator. She is a seasoned trilingual therapist with years of experience specializing in early attachment wounds and adulthood trauma. Sonia specializes in undoing shame associated to trauma. She also offers a wealth of wisdom, compassion, attunement, and presence to those she serves. Sonia?
Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right. Very grateful to be here today. And I want to start off with an exercise. And I'm going to ask everyone to participate because you're going to help regulate my nervous system. And I promise you that this tool that I'm going to share with you, if you use it regularly, is going to be life-saving, shift-changing even. And so before we start the exercise, some people often, when I introduce this tool in session, will say, you know, I don't want to be non-reactive, especially when there's a purpose and an intent to create change in someone else's thoughts and actions. I want to be able to react. So is this tool going to make me too peaceful that I won't react? And it's the complete opposite. So this tool is going to help you regulate your nervous system, and the more you practice it, the more you're going to find benefits with it. And so we're going to start off. If everyone doesn't mind, you can remain sitting, but if you feel like standing, please do. So I'm going to ask you to place your right hand over your heart and your left hand over your belly. And so you're going to begin with right hand over heart, left hand over belly. You could also put your left hand on your head. And you notice that when you do that, it's kind of like a really nice gentle pat. So either heart, either belly or head. And so I'm going to walk you through this little practice. It's called the vagal pause, V as in Victor, A-G-A-L. And so you're going to keep your right hand on heart, left hand on belly, or left hand on head. And I'm going to walk you through this gentle practice. And so I don't have my hands on my heart or belly, but I'm breathing along with you. So you're helping me again. And I'm really grateful. And so you're going to keep your hands on your body. And by doing this simple action, you're sending a message to the cellular level of your body. And so I'm going to ask you to now shift your awareness only down to your feet. So you're shifting your awareness from your hands that are on your body down to your feet. Don't change how you're breathing. The idea here isn't for you to do deep breathing. I don't want anyone passing out or dissociating. So just gently bring awareness to the feet, the soles of the feet on the ground, feeling the earth beneath you. And then gently shift your awareness to your lower body. Try not to follow any thoughts here. You don't have to do anything, but simply bring awareness. You don't have to act on anything, just simply notice. And then gently shift your awareness to your back, your shoulders, your spine. And here you might even drop your shoulders just a little bit. Gently shift your awareness now to your head. Notice your scalp. Shift your awareness now to your tongue. If your tongue is at the roof of your mouth, drop it down to the bottom of your mouth, touching your lower teeth. Right hand on heart, left hand on belly or head. And now gently shift your awareness to your hands. And release whenever it feels right. You can just let your hands go. And I don't know if you're aware or you notice there's a shift change that happens from before the exercise and after. And so again, when your hands are on your body, you are sending a message down to a cellular level. You see, our minds are usually in the past or the present. The past or the future. And our bodies are always present, always. From when we're little ones to the last breath we take. Right? And so the exercise that you just did with me helps to regulate your nervous system. Why is that important? Well, so trauma, as you heard, affects the way we view the world. It affects the way we view ourselves, right? Trauma isn't a mental diagnosis. However, it is a mental injury. It literally changes the brain. And I'm going to give you an example on how it does that. And so the nervous system, which is the driver of our reactions, is the part of the body that begins to develop when we're little ones. We've all heard of the fight, flight, and freeze responses. Well, those responses are developed when we're tiny. And the fight, flight, freeze responses, or collapse or dissociate, those are responses that are automatic responses and life-saving responses. And so I want to give you an example of how that's developed and what it looks like. We all have our experiences. The example I'm going to give you is going to help you to recognize why we act or why we react the way we do, or why others might be reacting the way they do. And the idea is to reduce shame that's associated. And so I'm going to give you this example. And if this example by any chance triggers anything in you, just go ahead and go back to the exercise that I just introduced to you. And it's going to help you to ground and regulate. So imagine a 5-year-old living in an environment where both mom and dad yell, scream, slam stuff. That 5-year-old learns to leave the situation, get out and go to a room, maybe even under her bed. So she just exhibited the flight response, going under the bed and hiding until everything is over, is the freeze response, right? And this becomes a pattern. She didn't have to tell her body to do that. Unconsciously, this is what happens. The nervous system says you got to protect yourself, you got to remove yourself from the danger, and do what you need to do to survive. So fast forward to present day, this little one is now an adult working at a restaurant, has a history of working at restaurants, and well, the people that she encounters every now and again, exhibit those same behaviors. They yell, they get angry, and what does she do? She, when that happens, if she either goes to the bathroom or goes outside to smoke, to avoid the trigger, the unconscious trigger of her past experience. This is a mild example, but it gives you a good idea of the nervous system. She doesn't have to tell herself to do this. This is what happens. However, after a pattern of this happening, she starts to now miss days from work because she shuts down, right? She starts to really develop a lot of self-blame, a lot of self-hate. She can't hold a job. She now experiences panic attacks and she's going to the emergency room. She has a smoking habit. She might have problems with relationships. So you can see as a little one, the same reaction saved her life, got her out of danger, but now as an adult, it's interfering, right? And so now her view of the world is very different, and her view of herself is one of shame, one of guilt. Shame and guilt are very different. Guilt is, I did something bad. Shame is, I am bad. And so the people around her also judge her for her behavior. She can't keep her job and so on. So you can see how this begins to happen and how negative associations are developed, right? And so the goal in working with, again, with trauma, one of the goals in working with trauma is helping to reduce that shame. And regardless of the kind of trauma, little t trauma, big T trauma, doesn't matter. The goal is to help the individual recognize that the nervous system has a lot to do with reactions and working through that to reduce that shame. And so another part of the nervous system that I talk about in session is called the polyvagal theory, which talks about sympathetic, dorsal, and ventral. Now, what I just gave you is an example of how sympathetic, dorsal, and ventral can happen within a certain amount of time, within moments, right? And so we're going through these changes, state changes, throughout the day. So someone in sympathetic may exhibit tunnel vision, may exhibit feeling really hot, may exhibit shutting down and avoiding, right? Someone in dorsal will exhibit avoiding as well, wanting to isolate, and again, dissociation happens in dorsal. And then ventral is back to a place where we connect with others and there's flow. And so our nervous system, again, is acting throughout the day. Why is it important to practice the exercise or the tool that I introduced? Because when we're in sympathetic or dorsal, our communication skills aren't the best. And so if you are in ventral, if you're able to go ahead and regulate your nervous system, you're going to be in a better place for communicating. You're going to be in a better place for yourself, and you've developed awareness, which minimizes the negative dialogue in your head that keeps you from getting your point across to folks. The other part that I think is really important and should be taught in Parenting 101 and also in our education is what happens to the brain when trauma happens. And so often, you know, people are labeled as really angry folks, or children as labeled as, you know, defiant and that kind of thing. So when trauma happens, the amygdala, which is in the middle part of our brain, the amygdala turns on. It's the alarm system of our brain. And by the amygdala turning on, emotions are on, right? So we're angry, we can't focus. And the frontal lobe, which is the part of the brain that offers dialogue, that offers logic, that helps you to critically think, that shuts down. And so often people will say, oh, I just don't know what happened. I blacked out, or, you know, I just completely shut down. I couldn't get my thoughts across and so on. That's because your frontal lobe is off. When you're in that heightened emotion, the amygdala is on and your frontal lobe is off. So how do you go back to the frontal lobe so that you create a change? You do something like the exercise that I introduced earlier. And so that's a really key component, because we often, you know, stigmatize people who do have very high intense emotion reactions, or extremely anxious folks, right? Or again, teenagers or children that have a history of trauma and are, you know, a little bit more in need of dialogue and help. And so, anywho, that's really important to know. It's a key component. The other little example I wanted to give, which is a really important one, and I often see this in the office, is when victims of domestic violence present, they often have a lot of shame and guilt associated to their experience. And some of the things that are often communicated to them is, why didn't they get out, right? Why did they just freeze and stay in the situation? Well, the two examples that I gave you, well, the example of the little one and how the nervous system developed, and also the example, then also the information on how the brain changes with trauma, are the reasons why, part of the reasons why. Right? There's so much happening within our body that when the mind is the only place that the person is in, there's a disconnect. And so the tool that I gave you is one of so many tools that can be used to help regulate the nervous system. And the goal in regulating the nervous system is so that we begin to develop awareness. And the goal of developing awareness is so that we again create change. We create change within ourselves, and therefore we create change within our communities and within our families. Let me see if I have anything else here. Hold on. So basically just summing up, how to create change. You become aware with help from a trauma-focused therapist, by getting involved in community practices, practicing grounding tools, right, to help regulate the nervous system. And there's also a mild catch-22 in practicing grounding skills. It's a form of meditating. And when we begin to develop awareness in this meditating, we start to quiet the mind. We don't silence the mind because the mind never stops, so we do help to settle the mind. And the more you settle the mind and in tune with your body, the more that you create space for things to surface and come up. And so it's so important when you're doing this work, or if you are focused on creating change and working through, to really work with someone who's aware of how to do this work with you so that you're not alone. And that's it. I just want to thank everyone for today, and thank you for allowing me to come here and speak.
Thank you.